Hi, this is Mr. Herzog on my Honors Biology YouTube channel. Today we'll be talking about symbiotic relationships and succession. Symbiosis is when two organisms of different species live in a close association with each other. At least one of the organisms uh, benefits from this relationship. And the first type is called mutualism, when both organisms benefit. That's what these two plus signs here refer to. One of the classic examples are the clownfish and the sea anemones. Um, in this type of mutualistic relationship, the sea anemones, all right, are actually protected uh, by the clownfish um, guarding guarding it from other from predators that would feed on the sea anemone. At the same place, um, the clownfish get a nice place to live. The bee pollinating the flower is also an example of a mutualism. Bees provide the necessary transportation mechanism for pollen to travel from one flower to the next flower. So when the bees do that, they're actually helping out um, the sexual reproduction of flowers. And the bee gets something in return. It gets nectar. Termites and protozoa, that the protozoa are single celled organisms that live inside the gut of the termites. Both of them benefit. The termites eat wood, all right, and they can't really digest that. So the protozoa provides those enzymes that digest the wood. The protozoa also get food from uh, living in the termite's gut. Um, and so it's a mutualistic relationship. Another type is called commensalism. Here, one organism benefits between the two, while the other one is not affected. My favorite example here are the whales and the barnacles that live on it. Okay, the whales get nothing out of this relationship, but the barnacles, they benefit. As the whale swims, the barnacles get to a new um, a feeding location. Okay, and a couple other example: the eyelash mite on humans, um, and the burdock seed with hooked tips dispersed on animal hair. Parasitism, this is where one benefits and the other one is harmed. Pinworms live in the intestines of mice and human. Uh, um, about a third of U.S. children, uh, and most of them, they're infants to toddlers, and usually a toddler will get these from going into a sandbox or some sort of communal location where other children have had it. And it's that's how, for example, my daughter got these. But it's treated very well with an antibiotic, um, and um, the situation is solved. Can you think of any other examples of parasites? I think you could put your mind to it. All right. The braconid wasp lays eggs directly on top of a tomato hornworm, and there, right here, you can see the hornworm is just covered with those um, eggs. All right. the developing embryo is actually going to feed on the hornworm. And so it's the wasps that are going to benefit from this tremendously. And just because it's so cool and kind of creepy, all right? But is this an example of parasitism or commensalism? There's a tongue eating, I think on the left, that's this is a snapper a fish. And the isopod has eaten away the tongue, okay? And um, actually, it's now replaced the tongue. So it stays there to eat on the food, all right, that the fish takes on, but also is able to pass the food like a tongue within the gut of um, of the fish. What do you think? Parasitism? Yeah, because it's actually it's eaten away at its tongue, even though it keeps the fish alive. You know, the fish has to feed. All right, because this isopod is actually feeding on it. So the fish is being harmed. Okay, I mean, after all, it had its tongue eaten. Ecological succession. Ecosystems are constantly changing in response to natural and human disturbances. As an ecosystem changes, older inhabitants gradually die out and are replaced by new species. This change in the community is called ecological succession. So, an example of this that actually you can see here as I get my colored pen. So we notice these rocks. The first organism that arrives are these lichens, okay? And those will give way to mosses and then grasses and weeds. And finally, you get small shrubs, all right? And as the forest matures, okay, the trees become more dense. Um, and until you get what's known as here as a climax community. Let's get rid of this. Okay. Primary succession occurs where no life exists. Can you think of any situation where primary succession would occur? Volcanoes offer examples of either wiping out existing life or creating new islands from under the sea. These new rocky surfaces are devoid of life forms. So there is an example of this. A new island in the within the Hawaiian Islands has formed, and it's really early in the stage of life forms settling in. Some tremendous amount of lichens, for example. What those lichens will do is they're breaking up the rock into soil for other types of plants to come in. Mount St. Helens is one of my all-time favorite examples of succession. All right. Um, and actually, we'll be watching, I'll be providing a video with some questions later on. So, this is what the mountain looked like. All right. It's a pyroclastic cloud, uh, tremendous temperature, way above 700 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay. That actually rolls down and um, kills all living things in its past, like all of these trees. And the one thing that happened also is that sudden change in temperature melted all the ice. So you got um, um, these uh, avalanches of tremendous amount of water coming down as well. Um, the first organisms to arrive in these areas, like I mentioned, are the lichens. This is an algae and a fungus living together in a mutualistic relationship. They can grow on bare rock and break it up. The lichens die and decompose to form the soil. They're an example of what's known as a pioneer species. These are the first species to populate an uninhabited area. Secondary succession occurs after a disturbance in an ecosystem community without removing the soil. So, after a forest fire, the succession of plants may end in a forest once again. And this is kind of evident of what's going on out on the West Coast with all those forest fires. And this happens every year, even though that this year is pretty deadly for a lot of people um, and and all of the communities. Um, and so I just wanted to point that out. Aquatic succession, a lake or a pond can be filled with sediment, gradually becoming a bog, and then a marsh, and then finally a meadow. Do you know of any lakes or ponds in your area that become, or maybe they are a bog now? Um, and there's a lot of them in this area. Um, as well as marshes and meadows. Okay, so that's the end of our relatively short um, um, lecture on symbiosis and succession. Until next time, have a great day, everyone.